Hi students, one of the most important things you can do is learn a method. Methodology is the most important thing in any academic discipline, and in fact, any discipline of life. Methodology is the key. So we need to learn how to do this, how to do a main topical study of a segment of Scripture. And the key is finding the author's flow of thought. We do this study in order to get into the mind of the author and see what he's trying and how he's developing his thinking on a particular topic, of course. And so, first of all, you have to recognize structural units in New Testament literature, especially the literature we're in now, getting into the epistolatory literature. That's discourse, that's prose, and it's very well connected. Words, phrase, sentence, clauses, all are very important. Every word's important, and how they relate to each other is very important. And so those relationships within a sentence, those words, phrase, and clauses, those relationships between those units indicate the kind of grammatical analysis that you do, understanding Greek grammar in this case in the New Testament. And but English, you can do it in English. If you understand English grammar well, then the grammatical analysis is what you do within the sentence. But when you get two or more sentences, that makes up a paragraph. And that's those sentences, if they're related right, one will be a topic sentence and the other will be the supporting sentence. When you have a paragraph, then you identify that paragraph and you divide that up. And when you have several paragraphs that have the same theme, that makes a segment. So a segment is made up of two or more paragraphs. Just like a paragraph is made of two or more sentences. And then a division is made up of two or more segments. And a book is made up of two or more divisions. So what is a segment? It's a unit of material that we'll be looking at. And that's usually the New Testament tries to divide up its material into segments. That's what we call chapter titles. In fact, in the 15th, 16th century, when that was done, the chapter titles were added. Stephanus basically tried to divide into segments. He got most of them right, but there's some that are divided incorrectly. Now, how literary units are related to one another within a larger unit determines the flow of thought. And so, for example, how these paragraphs are related. That is, paragraph 1, 1 through 7, paragraph 2, 8 through 15, and paragraph 3, 16 through 17 of chapter 1 of Romans, the first part of Romans chapter 1. Those three paragraphs, how they're related to each other, make up the flow of thought. So, what is the theme that runs through all of these paragraphs that unite these paragraphs into a segment? It's the theme of the gospel. And you observe that as you start going through. You see repetition and you see what's being talked about the most. And then you divide that up into and look at each paragraph. And that then you look at and see that there is a key idea that's supporting the key center of the entire segment. Now this is double-lined because it's for the entire segment. These are single-line because it's what's called the paragraph relations. And it supports the key center. And so in this, I eagerly preach the gospel, Paul says. That supports the key center. And down here in this paragraph, there's a paragraph relation. That is, it's a relation related to the key center. It is the power of God unto salvation. And so all of those support the key center. And now we can go through and look within the paragraph itself and how that is developed. The gospel is concerning a son, and it talks about who was born of the seed of David, who is declared the Son of God, through whom we have received grace and mercy, and so forth. And then that's kind of going from looking at this and describing who the Son is. And that's so the gospel is about the Son, right? And then the second paragraph, he talks about his desire to visit them, and he gives reasons for it, because, for, and he gives three of those in order that reasons why he wants to see them. And so these are particulars that lead to this general statement, I'm eager to preach the gospel to you at Rome. And then in the last paragraph, it's structured a little bit different. He says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of God, and gives reasons why, and the righteous will live by faith. And so in this segment, we have the gospel is concerning his son, eagerly preached the power of God. That is the flow of thought of this segment. So what do you look for? Things to look for when you're doing the analysis and trying to come up with what the key center is and what the paragraph relations are. You look for these kinds of things: repeated words, contrast, comparisons, list. Now, a list is 2 or 3 things that make up a list, and those lists are usually in some kind of order. So make sure that you look at those lists very carefully. There's cause and effects and causes. There's figures of speech, like I want to have fruit among you there in Romans 1. There's the conjunctions. Observe the verbs, where the action is. Are they past, present, and future? Look at the pronouns and how many there are and who's talking. So observe the details within the paragraph. That's sentence analysis within the sentence as well. So all those kinds of observations, what's going on within the sentences, and that's focuses on grammatical analysis. Then in paragraphs, bigger, larger pictures. Sometimes those paragraphs goes from general to specific, or specific to general, like we saw in the second paragraph of Romans. Sometimes it's dialogue, sometimes it's Q&A, sometimes there's a purpose statement, sometimes it shows the means by which something is done, conditional clauses, if and then the consequences to that. Also, the word unless is used to introduce conditional clauses as well. Then you need to observe the actions and roles of people and the action and role of God himself. Of course, you know that God is the main character in the New Testament, right? The emotional terms, I plead with you, the tone of it, like in the first chapter of Galatians, oh, foolish Galatians. What tone is that? Notice those things. Those are the things that you note within paragraphs. And then for a discourse, that is, segments themselves. How is the segment structured? Look for connections between those paragraphs and episodes. So, for example, if we were talking about the book of Romans, the first chapter, we saw that the first 17 verses is about the gospel. And then the second segment, verses 18 to 31, it's about the wrath of God revealed against. And then it shows what all the wrath of God is revealed against. And there's 3 or 4 paragraphs there that show that. And so what are the connections? See, we look at the paragraphs and what story is being developed there? What's the flow of thought? Look for major breaks and pivots, like interchange, where you have the gospel being preached, and then you have the wrath of God, and then the next chapter might be the gospel again, and then the wrath of God. Look at those interchanges like that. And then a chiasm, we saw that in Mark's gospel, where the pronouncement stories, it's developed into a chiastic structure where the center of the chiasm is the main interpretive key to the rest of it. And how about an inclusio? An inclusio could be something about, I long to see you to impart a gift to you. And then that's the beginning of Romans. At the end of Romans chapter 15, he says, I long to come to you in order that I might share this gift from you. And so in order to bring a gift to Jerusalem saints they're going through famine. And so we have a kind of everything in between that kind of gives the purpose for him writing what he's writing. And so those are the large kinds of analysis that you need to be looking at when you're doing these MTS. And the project will involve going through and looking at those relationships between paragraphs and how they're related to see the flow of thought.